Okay, welcome. Welcome to everyone. This is marketing, testing, and optimization with Pardot. It's all about A/B testing, multivariate testing, getting a sense for how you can improve what you're already doing in your marketing automation. We're going to talk strategy. We're going to talk some examples, some takeaways of what people have already done in their own testing that has worked tremendously. You can just literally copy what they've done and try it in your own tests. We're also going to dive into Pardot and talk about what it can do, the different aspects of it. It can do several different testing things with email as well as with landing pages. So my goal here is not to leave today until you've got all your questions answered. We will have Q&A at the end. And historically, that is sometimes even more fun than the presentation. So if you can make it, great. If not, no worries. Ask your questions anytime. What I will be looking at is the Zoom webinar chat, more so than even the Q&A chat. So if you have anything to say, throw it in chat. You can say hi. You can ask questions. You can also add your own information, your own strategy, your own tactics, things you've also tried. It doesn't have to be sort of presentation. I like to make this more like a dreaming event, right? More like a local user group event. So let's have fun with this thing and dive right in. All right. Testing gets a bad rap or it gets misunderstood, right? Hey, what are we doing with testing in marketing? We're looking at A/B testing buttons, right? Well, the orange button got this many clicks and the blue button got this many clicks. I don't know. Things are a little confusing. So let me ask you all, and this is the interactive portion of this webinar. Do you test right now? Do you have time to test? And if so, what do you test? Go ahead and throw it into the Zoom webinar chat. And it could be a simple yes, it could be a no, it could be we test landing pages, email templates. Do you test the subject lines? Do you, okay, yep, Terry, you test email subject lines. No to the above, okay? That's fine. And by the way, any answer is okay. You don't get kicked out. The people that were here early got extra credit on their final, but there is no wrong answer here because we're all at the beginning of this thing. Okay, some people are testing button colors and subject lines. Meg, we're gonna have some awesome intel for you on button colors, and I'd like to see if it bounces with your own learnings from testing. Subject lines, call to action buttons. That's a good one, as well as click through text. So what text elicits responses, and also in newsletters. Subject lines and newsletters. Excellent. Thank you all for sharing that. That gives me a sense. For those listening on recordings, gives them a sense. We're going to really dive into testing now. And I am your mad scientist for today. 88 miles per hour. So that kind of is a creepy picture, but no worries. So if you haven't met me already, great to meet you. Welcome to my Evil Marketing Lab. My name is Casey Cheshire. So I'm the founder here at Cheshire Impact, longtime marketer. I've been working with Pardot for about 10 years. And Cheshire Impact has done over 2,400 Pardot implementations because essentially we just love the heck out of the thing and we love teaching people how to use it. And that's why I'm here. And it's just to share what I've learned and also share some of the learnings and experiences from the people that we work with too. And we've got some great customers. And lastly, 32, that number is still 32, but that is the number of skydives that I've done. And so I like keeping track of that number because I enjoy it. And right now it's a little cloudy here in Nashua, New Hampshire, but I hope to get that number up soon. More on Cheshire Impact later. Let's get into some of the learning. All right, the agenda in the lab today. Do you remember those old labs from school? Do this first, put this amount of powder or secret substance in your beaker, right? Or for those earlier in class, I have a beaker from Brian Massey full of some tea. So first, second, third, fourth. First, we're going to talk about when we test and understand how it fits into the whole scheme of the maturity of marketing automation. It's important that you build things in marketing automation, and then it's important to test and optimize them. So we're going to talk about that progression. Then we're going to talk about why you should test. And this is the fun part because I'm actually going to share several takeaways of successful tests, things you can just literally try copying and seeing if they have that same effect in your own program. What to test. Oftentimes when we asked the question earlier, what do we test? We test the things that the tech makes it easier for us to test, if anything. We're going to have a hierarchy of testing. If you can come away with anything today, the hierarchy of testing blew my mind when I heard about it. It's the idea of if you can only test one thing, start here, then here, then here. It's really cool. And then we're also going to talk about how to test, the idea of what kind of process you're going to use, and then should you A/B versus a multivariate test. If you don't know what that means, cool, we'll talk about it. If you do, we'll hash out the details of the pros and cons of one versus the other. We'll talk about doing it in Pardot, and then some traps that you can fall into in testing. Finally, some resources. Finally, some Q&A. I'm well known for going above and beyond the Call of Duty when it comes to that hard stop at the end, the top of the that hour here. But I will do my best to get it all in there, and then Q&A will be as long as we all need at the end. So let's dive in. You need a plan when it comes to marketing automation. You know, thinking back to our evil scientist here, I actually just watched this movie again, Back to the Future. We watched this series. It was a rainy day, so the family, we all stayed indoors, and we watched all of these. Well, before they pulled off this crazy lightning strike clock tower thing, they had a plan to get there. And so we actually created one here at Treasure Impact, and you probably already know where I'm going with this if you've been to a webinar before. It's the CSI. It's a strategic roadmap. It's just a step-by-step, start here, do this feature first, then this feature, then this feature. What I don't like seeing are the blog posts out there saying, here are the 8 features you've never thought of using. Use them all right now. That's a distraction. What we need is a little bit of a roadmap, start here, end here, and that's what the CSI is. And there's 10 steps to it, and there is a call to action. Really, it's my only request is, like, if you don't already know what your CSI score is, get one. And what it does is it tells you a number between 0 and 10 of how you're doing with marketing automation. And it's okay if you're a 2, because then you know what steps you need to take to be a 3, a 4, a 5. So that's the CSI, but it has a progression to it. And so CSI number 8 in that checklist, after getting to know our customers, after building out nurture campaigns, building out email templates, is full on A/B testing and marketing optimization. Doesn't mean you can't do it beforehand. You certainly can, especially when it's the smaller test, just to try to tweak things. But what it also means is when you're done, the vast majority of all your building, you've got your nurtures, you've got your landing pages, you've got things built. Now it's time to go back and look at those and test what could make this better. And that's why we're here. And the question is always really helpful. Whenever I'm not sure if I'm using a feature fully, I go back to the CSI question. And this is also how the assessment goes. In a CSI, we ask you 10 questions. And based on your answers, you have a number from 0 to 10. So the question here is, do you test what messaging drives the most engagement in emails or landing pages? And if you and I were on a call doing the CSI assessment together, it takes about 30 minutes, you might say something like, well, we test, like several of you said in chat, well, we test this, we test that. And then what we'll share is different things you could be doing, different things you could be testing. And we come up with a score. Either I'm doing it all, you give yourself a 1, or I'm not doing any of that right now, give yourself a 0, or doing some of that, you give yourself a 0.5. And that's how you end up getting a score between 0 and 10. Cool, right? So that's the question. And that's what we're going to be trying to answer today, giving you the ammo to answer that. And so we talk about why testing. Why be here? Why did you come to this webinar? Well, a lot of it is because you've probably heard about some great results. Now, usually these get used in marketing campaigns, but when you really go out there and look for them and look at your own examples and customer examples, there's some crazy things that happen. Like this is the wild, mad science area of marketing. It can either be kind of humdrum, like, well, this subject did okay, not really sure what the big deal is, or you can have massive changes. And we have seen one client had 300% increase in new leads generated from some tweaks we all made to their landing pages together. So like, there's some fun to be had here. If anything, this is the fun zone. I'm in a lab coat. What could be more fun than that? Here's a couple other examples. 1, swap generic images for real life. Right? So instead of using clip art, by the way, clip art we're gonna talk about is a terrible thing to use. Clip art, or even that fake studio art, much better to use a picture of your actual customer. But when one company did that, they actually had a much higher conversion rate in their landing pages. Someone else replaced a slider with a search bar. Someone else cleaned up the copy and changed the picture, and they had a 433% increase. And again, these are the big wins, right? Not every test is going to win. And we'll talk about the actual ratio. There is a ratio of winning to maybe not winning. And even if you don't get a win, it doesn't mean you lost. It just means, you're on the path to find the next discovery. Someone else, move the form. This is a good one. Move the form above the fold being what you can see on the screen before scrolling. Put the form above that, and everyone sees an increase. In this particular example, they saw a 200% increase moving the form so it was completely above the fold. Most importantly is your submit button is above the fold. That's what's critical. And then lastly, changing that call to action from shop plans to get started now, right? That shop was getting people thinking, oh, I don't want to buy anything today, right? If someone, do you want to buy something today? No. Would you like to get started on this path that maybe ends up in you buying something? Much more likely. So just a couple examples of what can happen with some successful testing results. This is where we all want to get to, we all want to play in. And there was a reason that these results happened. Some of them were just sort of luck, but a lot of them were planned and intentional. So when it comes to the idea of testing, we talked about this already. It's fun. Really, this is where the creativity side of marketing and the measurement side gets to come and play. Because if not anything, you got to just try some things out. You just test some ideas. What if we put Marty McFly on our landing page? That sounds like a terrible idea. But if there's something a little bit like a better idea, maybe it works. More importantly, you got to be able to measure it. So we're going to talk about doing both of these things today. Okay, what to test? We all talked about in the chat things like call to action buttons. We even saw testing button colors, and I'm with you because for the longest time, I tested button colors. And there are lots of different colors you can have in a button. Anyone have a favorite button color? Or does anyone have like what color are your buttons on your own site? Orange. I like that. Orange stands out. Blue, red. Mostly match our branding. Barbara, I have a treat for you. Mostly blue, red, green and blue or purple. Nice, nice. So I once did a test, and not to say that we don't have to do the button test, but you don't have to do it anymore. But I'm with you because I once was at an internal agency, and I really wanted to swap the button out in a particular landing page. It was gray, kind of like this gray down here, this like HTML pure I'm a button type thing. That's what our submit button looked like. And I thought, no. Everyone says you need to have a bright fire engine red button. So I put the request into the graphics team to have that created. Now, this wasn't at Treasure Impact. Our graphics team is great. This was at a previous company. And after several days, what did I get back? I got back the same HTML gray button with the slightest hint of red shading in there. I had asked for fire engine red, gigantic button, and I got the same gray one back with a little red in it. And we didn't have time to necessarily just put another request in. So I said, okay, let's test it anyways. So we tested the regular gray versus a little bit of that shading in there. Wouldn't you know, the shaded one actually performed better. Not majorly better, but like 5 to 8% better than just the plain gray one. Well, the cool thing is mixing up the colors actually can increase the conversions. But guess what? I was talking to Brian Massey, and I'm going to talk about him a lot today because he's a brilliant guy, and I love his book. I love his content. He even has a podcast now. But I was talking to him on the Hardcore Marketing Show, and he brought up that thing that I've been testing for years in my career in marketing has been solved. The ideal color for a button is any color that's not in the color palette of your website. So anything that it's not even one color. Any color that is not in the palette, it's not in the standard color palette of your site, of your branding, performs the best. So if you think about even this page right here, Treasure Impact, right? Orange and white and blue, those are Chesh colors. My shirt has that on it. Our backpacks, our hoodies have all that on there. What would work great for me? Green. Green would work great. Orange wouldn't work as well for me because it's already on my page. But something like green, even like an aqua, anything that's not in the palette, it's true. And Brian's literally tested hundreds of these iterations. So the cool thing is we can test other things now. We don't just have to test buttons because that has been solved. You make it something not in the palette and you're good. So what that leaves us with is all the other testing that we've been doing. And I am here as well on this list. Before I did this research and dove into this topic, it can be kind of confusing. What do I test? Well, the app lets me test the subject line, so let me test that. And here you see a survey of what people are testing, right? What they regularly test in their A/B tests. And most of us are doing subject line. Why? Because the tech lets us do that with very little effort. Pardot can easily let us have the same look and feel in both and just change the subject. But what's crazy is, I don't know if you felt this too, usually subject line tests don't necessarily give you much back because typically we're just trying different fun, creative things. But there's actually a little order to the chaos that can make those tests better, and we'll talk about that. But notice you also see like the layout, the calls to action. That's good to test that as well. But it's a little disjointed. And so the quote here on the page, there's more to testing than seeing if emojis will increase your open rate. By the way, they will. Until too many of us are doing it, and then they won't. But right now they do. Use an emoji in your subject line, it absolutely increases your open rate. Now click-through rate's another story, and that's up to the next content. But do they help with that? Yes, they do. But there's more to it, to this whole testing thing, than just trying a trick, right? There's actually a process to that. And so this is where Brian Massey comes in. Handsome-looking fellow there. His lab coat's, he's got his thing embroidered on there. I got my junior lab coat here, but he's a fantastic guy. And I talked to him actually twice. Show number 39 is actually the first time I talked to him, which is the one I recommend if you're new to this topic. You want to hear some of the things I'm saying in a different way. Brian Massey's the source. Go to that. But if you do search for the Hardcore Marketing Show and Brian Massey, you'll see he's actually been in 2 shows. 2 episodes. So I definitely recommend you check out both of those. He's a brilliant guy. And so one of the things we talked about on one of the episodes was, what do you test, right? So he shattered my whole worldview when it came to things like the button testing and the email subject line testing. That's where I was at the time. And we really got into it. He said, no, actually, there's a hierarchy of testing. There's things you should test first, second, third, fourth, fifth. There's an order. And this spoke to me, right? Because I'm always talking about marketing automation needs that hierarchy, needs that order, right? Do this first, then this, then this, then this. So when he said that there was a hierarchy for testing, I'm all over it. I'm like, teach, right? Share with me. And then I was able to do some research and learn even more to what he was talking about. So here we go. The first thing that you should be testing is your value prop, your value proposition. Most important thing you can test, if you don't test anything else, test for value. And what that means is, are the words we're using in the subject, are the words we're using on the landing page or in the email, and the images themselves, are they conveying value, that this email is going to have value, that the call to action is going to have value to the recipient? And the word value is interesting, right? When you really look it up, it's something that, consider something that you would want to receive, or something that someone would actually pay for. Like, is this something that someone would pay for? It's worth their time, because people's time costs money, right? So is this something they would actually like receiving? One of my favorite radio stations, or now Spotify playlists, would be WIIFM. And early on in my marketing career, I had a marketing director basically say, you got to tune into this channel. And what that is what's in it for me? Not me as the marketer, but me as the customer, the prospect, the person receiving your email. The number one important thing you can ask about an email or landing page when you're kind of thinking, is this ready to go live, is what's in it for me? If I was the buyer, if I was the prospect, do I see that there's value from this? And one example, in getting an email saying our new website's live, that might be something you're proud of. You might have literally worked for 9 months on that, but is that important to the person receiving it? I recently received 3 emails from one company that I think highly of them, but I got to tell you, I got an email saying, soon our website will be up to date and new and fangled dangled. Then I got one saying really soon, like on Friday. And then when it happened, not only did I get one, but my whole team that was in their system got one, which was not cool. They failed the value prop. So when we think about value, and we talk about this more in depth in CSI number 1, it's all about getting to know the buyer, getting to know them and understand their challenges, their pain points. But really, when we're testing, we're testing either an asset, a landing page, a campaign, an email. We're trying to see, is what we're sending communicating that we have the solution to whatever their challenge or their pain is. And so when you do a value prop test, you're testing different words, different images, and sometimes even a different value altogether. So the words might be changed around to try to better exemplify something, or the images might be changed, right? We saw an earlier example saying, don't send a clip art image like this one over here. Send a real one of your real customers. Or it could be, maybe that value isn't important at all to our customers. Let's try a different value. Maybe instead of solving their audit pain, let's solve their acquisition pain, right? Whatever those different challenges might be, you're just trying to test for value. The number one important thing you can do, and again, stock images, pandering, Brian Massey never uses them. They come back as pandering. We kind of all know that too. It kind of seems like a fake advertisement when you see it. So the first test you want to do and want to plan for is value. How would it apply to a subject line, right? You know what's in the body of that. Just one subject versus another to say, are we conveying the value? 2, once you've been testing the value aspects, now you've got a value figured out, at least for the meantime. Now it's time to test the layout. And really you're trying to see what gets this value concept across stronger, right? So if the value is helping people maximize their use of Pardot when it comes to connected campaigns, which I think we can all relate to, and that's a different webinar. When it comes to connected campaigns, okay, you've got the value point, you've tested some of the wording, you tested some of the copy. Now let's see if we can move the page around to highlight certain things. And there is a particular trade-off oftentimes between beauty and results. And I would encourage you to keep an eye on the results and don't necessarily eliminate a test from being sent out just because it doesn't look good, right? Because as we mentioned earlier with the button testing, that color that clashes completely with your page, magenta or whatever you want to use, might actually be the most converting color for that call to action button. So try if you can to not necessarily think beauty first. Results often will come at a cost to the beauty, but it's worth it in the end if you can convert more people. Next, you've tested value, you've tested some layout. It's time to test by adding certain, it could be icons, it could be content, it could be thoughts of things that share the credibility and authority. And a good example of this would be quotes, thought leadership, offering a webinar or a recorded webinar. Additionally, statistics, though sparingly. My favorite here would be the analyst reports, awards, or just a quote from someone who is knowledgeable in the space that's not necessarily you. The Magic Quadrant, right, from Gartner is a great example of that. Different charts like that showing here is where we are. We've just got put into this section again and again, time after time. You could test by adding certain, indicators of that to your landing page or email. And again, it's a test, but you can either add something, remove it. You can add 2 different things to try to see if we add some credibility, things that show that we know what we're talking about. Does it increase the conversion? Does it increase people doing the action we want them to take? Next is social proof. Really, it's like, what do my peers think? And my being like the other prospects looking at the landing page saying, what does everyone else think on this? It's like you're looking around, is this okay? And when you see Tim or Jennifer on the page saying, yeah, this is okay. I've been a customer for over 4 years. Note that word stream example. This is probably the best example I've seen. I love the format. Consider this with your own marketing. Notice the different elements. You got a picture. It's not a studio picture. It's probably from their LinkedIn page. They're happy. Happy customers just from their smiles. And I do like this aspect of the customer for over 4 years. aspect of how long they've been a customer, showing they're not just some new customer who's going to find out later this is a terrible idea. They've kept renewing year after year. That's an important thing. Person's name, the company they're at, and a bit of a quote. Love that. It's a great example of social proof. Dropping those into a landing page can be very interesting. Now there's no harm, no foul if you can't follow that exact pattern, but try, because what you do find is that oftentimes, if not the earlier one, if not the credibility, social proof can have a massive impact on your landing page conversions. Ratings and reviews are also another one here. I mean, really, we'd have to take a page from the B2C world in terms of, you see their stars on Google, you see different reviews, right? This might be a great example for like a G2 crowd or some other kind of rating system where you're saying, hey, everyone else says this is working. And what this essentially is answering is the question, will I get fired from working with these people? And I know they're just filling out a form or they're just clicking on your email, but that's what it's addressing. It's addressing like, it's safe going this way. You're not getting scammed. Like I got called earlier today from a SaaS vendor saying, we have a promotion. If you convert to annual or you get off the free trial right now, then you'll save all this money. Okay, good. What's your credit card number? It's like, I don't know if that's a scam or not. Right. And I said, can you tell me anything from my account that you couldn't already know from me just sending you an invoice or, you have already found out in the wild? And they couldn't quite do that. So they didn't quite pass that weird check. And social proof really tries to address that, saying, nope, this is successful. And you can be one of these smiley people too. Finally, trust. And this again takes another page from the idea of the shopping carts, right? The shopping carts of the world, we're used to seeing little locks on there, or the fact that they're SSL encrypted pages. You don't have to worry about getting your credit card stolen. Consider a test around this in the B2B world as well, especially as it comes to your form completions, by just addressing certain concerns people may have. If you go to see a form and you see your email address, you're thinking, am I going to get nurtured, right? Or am I going to get spammed, even worse, by just this person? And are they going to respect me asking them to not email anymore? Or are they going to just spam me anyways, right? That's a concern. We all kind of have that. Same thing with phone number. I mean, how many people, if we're asked too soon what our phone number is, we're like, I'm not going to give that to you. I'm just browsing. I don't want you to know this. And they fake it, right? So consider putting a message around the email or around the phone number or below a form mentioning that you respect certain things. Like, we're not going to spam you. We're going to protect your data. Your data is safe. Your data will not be shared with anyone. Things like that. This is a time to test that. So you would have your regular landing page, and you'd have a landing page with that phrase or one of those phrases near your form to say, this is secure, or maybe even test with an image, a lock image or something like that. And lastly, you can build trust, but it's a lot faster to borrow trust. So that's where those logos from third parties can come in. And the idea of enabling Pardot to have secure pages, that's also helpful. Otherwise, you can have the opposite of trust, where Google or other browsers may say, uh-oh, are you sure you want to be here? This page isn't secure. And that's the last thing you need to have shown on your landing page right before asking people to fill out your form. And last thing, if you're not sure if you've got your SSL set up in Pardot, here's a quick screenshot of where it's at. It's in the domain management part of your admin. And this is what it'll look like. It'll look like, hey, it's validated and SSL is enabled. Of course, it's enabled to Pardot, but you want to make sure your own domain has it enabled so you can send people to that HTTPS location. Quick tip on that is that while there's massive benefits to it, and it's kind of a no-brainer, it's kind of like you have to do that these days. If you have any images or files that are in those templated pages that aren't hosted in Pardot where it's also secure, those other locations need to also be in SSL. Otherwise, they may not load, or you may have other warnings thrown to the user saying, well, this page is secure, but it has things that aren't secure in it, right? You don't need any of those road bumps to get in the way of showing that people can trust you when they're on your site. All right. So we've talked about the hierarchy of testing. And now it's time to, now we have like probably 1,000 ideas of what we want to test. Now it's time to actually test it. Consider this process, modify it, make it your own, screenshot it, do whatever you'd like, but consider some kind of basic process when you're going to do a test. The key word here is intentional, being intentional about a test you're doing. Now, do you have to do this for every subject line test? No, I get that. But maybe these things are going on in your head, or maybe you design one of these for all the future subject line tests you're ever going to do, or at least for the next 5 emails. It all really starts with what your goal is. Sometimes, and I've been guilty of this as well, we test just for giggles. And oftentimes we only get giggles in return or nothing at all, right? A room full of crickets. And that's because we didn't really have any aim in mind. So we're not really sure if we ever accomplished it. And just getting more opens and emails is not much of an inspiring goal because, well, opens is kind of a funky metric. So really consider things like, I want to get more engagement from our key buyers. I want to get more click-through rates. I want to get more conversions on the landing page, more people downloading this content that we're offering them. So we're sending this free content out. Like, you don't even have it gated. I'd love people to actually get it. How many people click through to get that content? That might be your goal, right? And if that's your goal, great. You can then create a hypothesis, which is just a fancy word in a lab code to say something like, a guess. And you probably all remember from high school biology or high school science, I believe that prospects aren't taking this action because it's too noisy, right? So that might be your hypothesis. And this is the fun part as well with marketing, because you see a landing page and we're constantly coming up with a hypothesis when we see other people's marketing. I mean, you could raise your hand or whatnot with me or start shouting at your screen, but how many times do we see other people's marketing and we automatically create hypotheses of how that I would have done it better, right? I'm with you, like, huh, that's weird. Or advertisements on the TV. We're like, no, I definitely could have done that different. Or what a waste of $1 million for that Super Bowl ad. So hypotheses are the fun part, where you say what it probably could be improved by. And then you start figuring out your testing situation, which is a simple way of saying, figure out the way in which you want to test this hypothesis. You have this theory going on. How could you test your theory? And it might be something like, well, if we think that the page is too noisy, there's too many things on it, there's too much copy, people aren't reading it and they just think it's busy and they don't want to mess with it, then the way we're going to test it is by building a second landing page template that is super, super full of white space, a few fun graphics, but like much more simple, where it's very clear we need you to click on this magenta button or this lime green button, whatever it is. And then from there, you actually go and do the test. Oh, actually, nope, I skipped a step. Measurements. So measurements is usually at the end, but I just added it in here because I want to make sure we just check real quick to make sure we're measuring against this testing situation. It would be terrible to get to 5 and realize you actually can't report on that particular stat. So the good news is if you're setting it up in Pardot, whether it's an email test or especially like a multivariate landing page test in Pardot, it'll just show you the stats for you automatically, and it's fantastic. But if you're testing something else that may need a little more tweaking or a little more following, maybe setting up a campaign inside of Pardot or something like that, just make sure you're thinking about how you're going to measure it first and then execute your test, right? So you just see like a simple process. If you wrote it on a scratch pad, it's going to make it that much more clear because you may actually have several hypotheses you want to test to get that one goal, right? The problem we're trying to solve is we need people to understand that connected campaigns is mostly preparing and cleaning up your old campaigns, and we need you to engage with all this content and learn so you can actually set it up. And there may be multiple hypotheses that you need to set up or test against, because maybe it's like, well, maybe people are too busy, maybe they don't know how to do this. We could test this, test that, test this, test that. So you can see one goal might have multiple tests that you're involved in. But the good news is it's all pushing you toward a real result. Okay. So 2 major types of testing. And it sounds like a lot of us have done A/B testing. Has anyone done any multivariate testing? Go ahead and just throw it in your chat menu if you have. And if you have, you can even say what you've tested in the past. So A/B testing and multivariate testing, it's essentially the same thing. We're just testing one version versus another. Multivariate gets fancy because what it ends up doing is it tests multiple things, multiple changes on a page. Typically with A/B testing, you're testing one major change. Like if you look at an example on the A/B side, the A and the B, A has a graphic, B doesn't. Now, those bolded lines, the headline and that line down below, maybe that's the call to action button, that doesn't look like it's any different. So typically in an A/B test is one thing changed. And the reason for that is if you change more than one thing, you're not quite sure why exactly it worked. And this, and I raised my hand on that one, is what happens with a lot of testing. If you go too crazy with your testing all at the same time, you may get a positive result, but then you're not sure why. And then you can't really repeat that same success on any of the other landing pages because you're not really sure what drove that improvement. You can sure use that same look and feel, but if it's something to do with value, you may not know exactly what chord you struck with your prospect. We had a question, do you have a recommendation for tracking and archiving your A/B test results? For example, would you keep your hypothesis and result in a PowerPoint, spreadsheet, etc.? Yeah, great question. You know, typically what I'll do is I will keep them in a spreadsheet, and I'll have a couple different tabs. So typically, and they'll all kind of be related to each other. Um, I'll I'll have like a master testing tab, and then the tabs after it will be for a specific goal, right? I'll have one sheet per goal, and then I'll have all the different kinds of tests I might want to try to accomplish that goal, and then their prospective results. I will go to PowerPoint to spread the news so that we don't need the non-testing civilians not in lab coats seeing the spreadsheet. So what I'll do is I'll take numbers from there and I'll put them on a PowerPoint. But yeah, I typically kind of keep those stats in a spreadsheet so that I have them handy. If I need to paste some pictures down below in one of the tabs, I'll do that too. That's just only so I can build the PowerPoint faster in the end. That's a very good question. Very good question. So, all right, A/B testing, you change one thing. Multivariate, you can actually test multiple different changes all at the same time. The challenge is you need a lot more bandwidth. You need a lot more tests to happen in order to get enough numbers to prove that something happened. Okay, so a comparison of A/B versus multivariate testing. When in doubt, I would say start with A/B, but it's good to know what multivariate is so you can eventually potentially get there. Or if you're at a large enough company with enough volume, you could absolutely launch multivariate test. It's also good to know the difference between the two so you don't accidentally blur the two lines and make the results weaker than they could be. A/B testing, typically it's one major change at a time. I'm not going to come out from your computer and slap your hand if you make two changes, but just keep in mind that you want to make a change in one specific area of the hierarchy, right? So if you're testing for value, make a value change, or you could make a couple changes, but it has to be on the same hierarchy step. So, okay, we're going to test for value, do that, but don't test for value and for hierarchy and for layout and throw like a little social change in there at the same time. You could, if you just know your landing page is terrible, you could just do like a catch-up test and put all those things in the new one. Just know that you won't necessarily know which element was actually the most beneficial, and you may end up having a landing page that has several things in it that you don't even need. And maybe getting rid of some of those things might actually increase your conversion rate as well. So that's why it's usually better just to do one change at a time. That's where A/B comes in. They're quick, they're quick to test, and they don't require much volume because you literally just need to see enough results. I mean, consider like 100 on this page, 100 on this page. I'll talk about how the number changes and how much you actually need, but it doesn't require too much. Especially if you have dramatic results out the end, it doesn't take much at all. A great example of this would be in Pardot, email testing. There's an A/B test for email. You have one email, you can very easily then set up an A/B test where it'll send some to one, some to the other. We'll look at this next, but you can very easily have that happen. And then boom, you can make a decision moving forward, or maybe in our drip campaign, let's use the winning email. Multivariate testing, is comparing multiple changes at once. So this could be, let's see what header works the best, what image works the best, and what call to action works the best. And if you can wrap your head around this, you could say between all three of those different variables, build like a 3x3 matrix. Between all three of those variables, what's the best three-way combination between all of them? The best header combined with the best middle, combined with image, combined with the best call to action. Right? You see how that's amazing. Now, if you have enough traffic, like Amazon.com, then their multivariate tests can literally go for minutes, and they have millions of results, and they'll know if something was substantial enough. Facebook as well. Even our larger enterprise, and if you have a lot of volume on your site, or if this landing page is going to be getting a lot of volume, you can go this route. But typically, multivariate is in those very high trafficked areas. And most landing pages, unless they're getting blown up left and right, don't typically have enough volume for that. Now, note that Pardot does have what they call multivariate testing, but as we'll find out, it's more like an A to B to C to D A/B test. If that's confusing or whatnot, hey, just throw questions in there. It's all good. You can throw them in the Q&A or in the chat. So let's get technical, right? We talked about A/B and multivariate. It's a lot easier to just see it inside of Pardot and just understand what's going on. So you've probably all built emails by now. If you haven't, it's going to be a blast. If you scroll down on that basic email setup, down at the bottom, you'll see A/B testing. And all it's going to do is create a copy of whatever you currently have. And then you can create a version B out of that. Now, to create a version B, all you need to do is modify something in that version. Now, again, we're not going to go crazy and modify 1,000 things because we want to keep it an A/B test. But it's quite simple to be able to just do that. Now, what's neat about it is that Pardot's actually going to show you the results. So let's see, pull up that screen. So actually, here's even another step just to show you. When you do enable that, it's literally going to be the same flow if you're building like a list email, but they're going to have this B tab over here, right? So normally have these other tabs anyways, but now there's an A and a B. So you can very easily switch between the two. Just don't go crazy with it. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that. One change versus many. You could do many, but ideally, if you're going to be intentional and going in the right direction, you want to do just one major change at the same time. Okay, last part on this is the test length. You can decide how long you want it to go. And why would you change that? Because you're going to need data here. You're going to need to see, when it comes to emails, opens or clicks, you're going to see results. Because what it's going to do is it's going to wait a certain period of time, and you notice you can choose opens or clicks, at least out of the box here. And I know opens is circled, but I almost always do clicks. I really rarely ever do open tests because it's not worth the time and attention. Right? If you're going to do all this time, you want people to engage with that email more. Whether they opened it or not, it's not going to be really worth your time. I know you're busy. I'm busy too. Go for clicks 90% of the time, 95% of the time. If you have an open problem, maybe you can focus on that. But really, open is such a fickle number anyways that I always go for clicks. It's action-driving stuff, right? So what will happen is if you mark it for clicks, you're going to want to see, it's going to send out A and B. It's going to send out these emails to a percentage of people. And you can see on that slider down below, you can decide what the percentage of people is going to be. So what I'll do is I'll say, okay, I typically do like 20%, but it just depends on how big the list is because you want enough people to really sink your teeth into the test. I usually do about 20%. And you want to give it enough time for people to click on that email. Now, because it's an email and we all know how email goes, I typically give it anywhere from 2 to 3 days, but no more than that. One can be a little short because one gets those early clickers. Sometimes we don't all have a chance to get into every single folder in our inbox every single day. So typically what I'll do, 2, maybe 3 days, no more than that, because beyond that email, gosh, who knows where that email is? Page 3 or 4 in your inbox. So no, thank you. Set it for 3 days, set it for clicks, do it about 20% of your audience, and it's going to automatically send the email to both groups. And then whichever group gets more of what you were looking for on this chart opens, in an ideal world, clicks, whichever one gets more is going to receive the rest of the people in the list are going to receive that email. They're going to receive the winner. right? So A and B, over 3 days, go to the 20% of the crowd. The rest of the 80% are going to receive the winner. It's magic. It's like hands off. You don't really need to do much to it, and it just operates, just executes. Now, it makes it easier for the system and for you if you have some dramatic different A versus B. So really testing on value first, then testing on layout to really try to get some stark differences. Because if one version gets 1% more opens than the other, it may not even actually be that big of a winner. But what you're looking for is to actually find out some results. Another question. What is the easiest way to do A/B testing in emails that are part of an engagement studio as opposed to a list email? Yeah, great question. Typically what I do is I will do a test like that to people that aren't yet in that drip campaign. Depending on how long it is, you could also send a one-off email to those people. If you're on like a 30-day cadence with your nurture emails, it can be perfectly fine to send them a second email in between that 30 days. If they're getting an email every 4 days, that might feel too much for them. But usually what I'll do is I'll just do like a one-off email to the same list, do an A/B test. And what I'll do is then I'll add it into the drip campaign, but at a point where people that are already in it aren't going to get it. Yeah, it's kind of like that's the guinea pig audience. But yeah, great question, Mike. Cool. Okay. Multivariate landing page testing in Pardot. This is actually really cool because in the past, it was easier to test email. When it came to landing page testing, it was kind of hard because you had to just manually do everything. So you would have to create one landing page, clone it, create another one, and then you would have to, on your own, drive people to one, swap out the URL, drive people to the other. So now Pardot allows you to automate the heck out of that whole process. You still create the two landing pages, and you can see in the interface here, you just add them into the mix. And you can actually add a bunch of them, and you can weight how many or what percent of traffic goes to one versus another and another and another and another. And I cut it off down here because it doesn't just have to be two. There's like 3 or 4 or 5. You can have a bunch. That's why they call it multivariate. But really what it's doing is it's just testing one versus another versus another. So it's not quite that 3x3 matrix that we were talking about earlier. It doesn't really get that complicated. But what it is doing, though, is just comparing the performance of one landing page versus another, and in the most important way possible, which is conversions. So that's my favorite stat to look at. Is this page converting? Is this page actually accomplishing its goal of either capturing a lead or getting someone to get that content? Cool thing is when you add them in there and you tell it the weighting, you then choose a vanity URL, which could be very simple, and you drive all the traffic to that one URL, and then Pardot will magically have the different landing pages shown at the weighting that you've chosen. And what's cool, and I did a little clip down here at the bottom, it starts to tell you how many views you've had across them all, and then how many conversions you've had across them all. So you can then make that call on which landing page to go with. It's a really cool way of doing it. And I think the part with this is you need the middle or higher tier Pardot for these tests. But it's a really cool feature once you're ready for it. Obviously, if you have a landing page you want to start testing, it's a great way of doing it. All right, next on for testing traps and what not to do. Has anyone tested for statistical significance in any of their marketing testing? If you have, give me a math geek or give me a I have or a smiley face in the chat. Statistical significance. Those are like two big words. And while everyone's doing that, I'll answer this real question before we move on to this new topic. Have you done any significance testing? But one question I have is the multivariate test only applies to landing pages created within Pardot. Yes, that is correct. That's actually a good question. I had to think about it for a second because I'm thinking, I could just tell it a different location. But no, it's relying on Pardot to tell it the conversion report back. You know how all the landing pages in Pardot, it's aware of the conversions, and you can look at landing page reports, you see conversions. Well, it's kind of feeding off of that. So that's where it gets the information. So you do need them to be Pardot landing pages. But the cool thing is you could very easily take a non-Pardot landing page and just, put it into Pardot, and then you can then test it from within there. So even if it isn't permanently going to be in Pardot, you could have it temporarily in there. And Kat, looks like you and I were testing for statistical significance, and so we'll dive into this topic. Great question, by the way, Rachel. So yeah, statistical significance. Here's the trap. And this is where we get kind of math geeky. And I was fortunate, or actually unfortunate enough to have way too much math in college. I don't know how I survived. But here's the deal. We can actually inadvertently choose the wrong winner. We can choose something that didn't even win. And we could do a whole lot of busy work if we're not careful with our testing results. And really what it is if we get numbers that are really close, like let's say you have 10 tests and 5 go one way, 4 go the other way. Is that really statistically significant? No, it's not actually. I've heard another example. Like if you flip a coin, a quarter, 1,000 times, there'll be several times where you get it 3 or 4 times in a row. But that doesn't mean that you're more likely to get heads than you are to get tails. Over enough time, you'll see that it's evenly spread around. So some of the challenge is that if you see a result, it takes 2 seconds, right? It takes 2 seconds to throw into a calculator. And here's one I found for you. Just A/B test, Google A/B test calculator and just throw the numbers in there. There's a lot of math behind the scenes, but essentially what we're trying to prove is that these results didn't just happen by chance. And no kidding, there is math to prove it. But what you want to also do is make sure that the thing is actually significant, which means it's worth you moving all the traffic onto the new one. A lot of times you make a test and nothing really comes of it, or you do something 100 times and 55 people say yes to one and 45 people say, or 50, the difference is 5 out of 100. That's not really that significant. And so the lower the results are, the lower the difference, the more you're going to need to test, the more volume you're going to need. And so what this does is it basically checks out, have you done enough tests? Do you have enough volume? And then are the results big enough with the volume you have to show that this thing is actually legit, that you have a real winner here? If so, when this thing turns green and tells you it's happy, you've got a winner, and you've got something you should move all your traffic from the old one or from whichever one lost onto the new one. And then you can move forward. Without doing this though, you can inadvertently pick just one that's just as good, or all that work could be spent doing something that isn't really that much of an improvement. And the number is 1 in 7. That's the industry average of how many tests actually come with a statistically significant result. It's 1 out of 7. I don't know if that means we're testing a lot of crazy things, and that's okay. That's okay. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. If you're really deliberate, though, Brian, and I've seen this too, have said where you can get it down to like 1 in 3, 1 in 4. If you're being very intentional about the hypothesis, the goal you're trying to reach, the different ways you want to try to test that. So just keep in mind, every result isn't going to be a magical one, but just watch out that you don't get disappointed, right? You test something out. We came to this awesome webinar. You test something out, and it's like you do the calculator, and it's like, no, you don't really have anything here. You don't be like, man, that Casey's crazy. This is BS. No. Keep going. Keep doing your planning, your testing, trying the value, those kind of things, because a gem is waiting out there for you. And here's a good example of the idea of causation and correlation and statistical significance here. I have a theory. If we saw earlier, 1 in 7 marketing tests win. Well, apparently there's a stat as well that says that 1 in 7 people in the US are members of a gym. Well, if that's the case, then technically only members or only marketers that attend a gym get winning tests. Clear. That's right. No, it's not right. There's this thing called correlation and causation. I don't know if anyone's ever bumped into this. And Tom Fishburne has a great cartoon here. I don't know if you know of the Marketunist. He was on the podcast. He's brilliant. He talks about how to be creative every day. But he also draws these amazing marketing cartoons because he was in corporate for like 10 years, got out and just decided to do cartoons full time. But what we're talking about here is just because a number says something doesn't necessarily mean that it's the cause. It could just be correlated. It could just be, well, 1 in 7 marketing tests result in a win, and 1 in 7 people in America go to the gym, but they have nothing to do with each other. It doesn't necessarily mean they're related. And so to be careful, and one of the traps is it's not significant. The other trap is it's not causal. It's not related, right? It's not something that it's like a cause and effect. And so the solution here to avoid this kind of nasty path, right? Look down here, shaved heads sales, right? I guess all the sales guys and gals are going to shave their heads now. No, they're not related. So to avoid that, you can always repeat a test. Very interesting, right? Repeat a test and see if you get the same results. You can also, you want to use a control. And so nowhere, anywhere tonight have we talked about, or tonight. Hello, Singapore. Have we talked about not using like an A or an A/B test? And in my head, sometimes I assume A/B, the A is like your original. It doesn't have to be. You could A/B test 2 other kinds of landing pages. The only challenge is you don't know how they relate to the A. So I almost always use A as the original existing one, and then B is like the one that I'm testing. By doing that, you don't fall into a trap of trying several other things and not knowing which direction to go in. So use a control, and a control means something you don't change. You just leave it the way it is. Also, be aware of your own bias. This happens a lot, and it can be challenging. You may think that in your hypothesis that if we do this, it's going to work. Well, just be aware that when you look at the numbers, you may be trying to look for that result because that's what you believe it to be the case. So you want to kind of suspend your own belief just for a little bit. And one of the ways to also do that is just have a peer review and analysis. Having a coworker look at it, another marketer you trust. I'm happy to look at what any kind of test data you have. Just send it to me, Casey@CheshireImpact.com. And I'll tell you, I'll run through the calculator too. And I'll say, this looks related. This looks correlated. If not, I'll tell you that too. But just feel free to bounce it off of someone to make sure you're not kind of in your own isolated bubble making decisions. And this could be hard too, especially if you're a marketer, you're a single marketer on your own team. All right, finally, top of the hour. Wow, we actually made this thing work. So some great optimization resources. Then we will close up and do some Q&A. So highly recommend Brian Massey. I know I've been kind of crushing on him the whole time. Sorry. Great guy. Really funny, actually. Funny guy, which is why I had him back a second time. I'll probably try to talk to him a third time until he stops talking to me. I'm going to keep inviting him back on. Learn so much from him. Highly recommend you check out that episode. If you haven't listened to the Hardcore Marketing Show, it's on Spotify. It's on iTunes. If you don't even listen to podcasts, this would be one to check out. I learned a lot from Brian. Waiting for Your Cat to Bark is a great book on testing. If you haven't already looked into it, highly recommend you check that out. Mech Labs, very interesting. A lot of the stats we got from them. Crazy Egg as well. And if you're working with someone already on the Chesh team, ask them. Most people in the team have done hundreds of implementations. They've done all sorts of marketing. So ask the person you work with on the Chesh team what they've seen. Ask them what they've seen work and even encourage them to ask their team. So we have internal Slack channels and all sorts of things. So ping them and ask them how you could improve your own testing plan, bounce your testing plan off of them, or even use your own contact at Chesh to ward off that internal bias that maybe you think something is going to happen before it does. So some great resources for you. All right, time to optimize. The only call out to action I have for you here today before we get into Q&A is if you don't already have a CSI done, it's free. It's about 30 minutes, and it just tells you where you're at with marketing automation, and it also tells you your very next step. It doesn't mean your very next step with Chesh. It just means the next thing you need to tackle with Pardot. And so all you need to do is put CSI in the chat, and then we'll make sure we reach out to you afterward to schedule that with you. Again, it takes 30 minutes, and you'll have a number. What's cool is all these webinars line up to where you're at in marketing automation. So Ethan, I see you, and I'll write you down, and we will follow up with you. And anyone else, all you do is put CSI in there between now and the Q&A, and we'll make sure we reach out. You can also put it in the Q&A menu as well. Cool. Book on marketing automation. I'm excited to share with you all that it has been finished. It is now off to the teams. All the publisher people are doing their publishing things. And before the end of the year, They should be out, published by Forbes Books. So there will be a book on marketing automation strategy coming out. I'm excited to tell you about that. And as we get closer to that, we'll be able to share when you can expect to get that. All right. Thank you all for coming. We will stop the recording and we'll get to some Q&A if we have it.